Right now, you see him holding that trembling Oscar statue, tears in his eyes. You know who this guy is? Richard Attenborough. Yeah, that sweet grandpa from Jurassic Park. But look at him now, sitting in a care home in some corner of London. So how did he end up like this? Well, that story is the kind you've never heard before. There's Richard's room overlooking the Thames, walls full of Oscars, photographs. But look at those shaking hands. The man's 90 years old now. That old sparkle in his eyes still there, though. "I'm Richard, you know," he tells the nurse every morning. Same sentence. But there's something he doesn't know. Today, the biggest secret of his life is going to explode. He's sitting at breakfast, chatting with the other elderly folks. Across from him, an old opera singer. Next to him, a forgotten theater star. "Let me tell you something," says Richard, eyes fixed on the window. "When I was filming Gandhi, the first thing I said to Ben Kingsley, wait, don't miss this part. The Gandhi film wasn't just a movie, you know. It was an obsession for Richard. He'd chased this project for 20 years. The producers were going, who's going to watch this film? But he knew this story had to be told. That Oscar night in 1982, Richard's voice started trembling. Right then, there was a knock at the door. Coming through the door is David, you know, that nature documentary brother of his. There's actually been a secret rivalry between these two for 70 years. "Richard," says David, holding an envelope, "you need to see this. The real bomb's about to drop." You know what's in that envelope? An old letter from the BBC archives. At Richard's first TV casting, David had competed against him. Richard's face changes. Did you sabotage me that day?" David sits down quietly. "We were brothers, but we both wanted the same thing, to be famous. When that phone rings, everything's going to turn upside down." Richard's shaky hands pick up the phone. Calling is a sound technician from the Jurassic Park set 30 years ago. "Richard, buddy, I need to tell you something. Spielberg's offer, actually. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet." The guy on the phone is telling Richard the truth. Spielberg was actually thinking of someone else for Jurassic Park, but he was so impressed by Richard's Gandhi performance that he had the script rewritten for him. "The John Hammond character was born from your leadership energy in Gandhi," says the voice. Richard's eyes fill up. All these years he thought he was just lucky. Turns out he was talented. The nurse comes, medicine time. But there's something he doesn't know. Is there some experimental stuff among these medicines to strengthen his memory? David holds his brother's hand. "Richard, I'm going to tell you something else. That tsunami in 2004, what you're seeing now is nothing. 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Richard's daughter Jane and granddaughter Lucy were vacationing in Thailand. When the news came, Richard left his set, jumped on a plane. That day I was filming dragons and tigers on set," Richard whispered. "When the cameras stopped, real life began. And real life never gave me what I wanted. They searched for 12 days, hoped for 12 days. When he read that document, the Thai government's official death report, Richard Attenborough gave the greatest performance in history, staying strong. When I lost them," he said, staring into space, "I lost myself too. But the movies kept me standing." David stroked his brother's hair. "You won't believe this, but in the records of that tsunami day, there were moments when Richard cried on set, but he never showed it to anyone. This is exactly when everything changed. When Richard came to Denville Hall, he felt lost. But here were people who had suffered as much as he had. The elderly woman sitting in the corner of the room was Kathleen Byron, the star of Black Narcissus. "Richard," she said one day, "did you come here to die?" "No," Richard replied. "I came to remember." Every morning, he would watch the Thames with Kathleen. "This river," said Richard, "is like the flow of my career. Sometimes calm, sometimes turbulent, but always continuing." As security guards approached, Richard would try to escape at night, into his memories, to Gandhi's set, to the Oscar ceremony, to the first day of Jurassic Park. One evening, a small theater show was organized at Denville Hall. Richard was going to take the stage. 90 years old, memory weakened, but spirit still strong. "I'm Richard Attenborough," he said into the microphone, "and I want to tell you a story." He only had 10 minutes, breath to speak. But in those 10 minutes, he summarized his 70-year career, from Gandhi to Jurassic Park, from sibling rivalry to family loss. "You know," he said in his final words, "even when the cameras stop rolling, the story continues." Applause echoed. Richard closed his eyes. No one knew at that moment this would be his final performance. When the door opened, what they saw wasn't Richard's room, but a cinema hall. Richard had spent his final days watching his films. On screen, the final scene of Gandhi was playing. "When Bapu died," Richard whispered, "I died too, but I was reborn." The nurse came for a check. "Sir Richard, how are you feeling?" Clues about who his fans really were. Richard smiled. "I know that out there in the dark, there are people watching me. I did all this for them." David squeezed his brother's hand. "Richard, you didn't just make films, you touched lives." This was the last chance. Richard looked at the camera one last time, an imaginary camera. "Action," he whispered, and rolling. When they thought it was over. Richard Attenborough's story had ended, but his works would live much longer than him. At Denville Hall, a new resident moved into his room. His Oscars photographs were still hanging on the walls. The voice on the phone sounded familiar, but the new resident spoke like Richard. "I'm an artist," said the newcomer, "and I came here to live with my memories." Everyone had learned the truth, but the real shock. Richard Attenborough had never died. He had merged with the spirit of Denville Hall. Every new resident was living a part of his story. The Thames flows, Denville Hall stands, and Richard's voice still echoes in the corridors. Even when the cameras stop rolling, the story continues. David Attenborough stood at his brother's grave. "Richard," he said, "you were right. The story really does continue." Final shock. The gravestone read, "Sir Richard Attenborough, director, actor, storyteller." Even when the cameras stop rolling, the story continues. And the biggest secret, Richard's last words weren't action. He had said, "Re-hook," as if even in the final moment of his life, he was trying to hook the audience. At Denville Hall, it's still rumored that at night, the sound of action can be heard from the corridors. You won't believe this, but David's envelope didn't just have that BBC letter. There was a second envelope too, one Richard had never seen. "What's this?" asked Richard, opening the envelope with trembling fingers. What came out was a love letter, and film contract from the 1960s. But there's something he doesn't know. This letter was from the love of his life. "Diana Rigg," Richard whispered. "Is she still alive?" David smiled. "I have a surprise for you, brother. She's here too, at Brinsworth House. Wait, don't miss this part. Diana Rigg. Yes, that Emma Peel from the Avengers. She'd had a secret affair with Richard in the 1960s, but they'd chosen their careers. They'd separated. When that phone rings, everything's going to change." It was Diana calling. "Richard, after 60 years, I wanted to talk to you. What you're seeing now is nothing." When Richard went to Brinsworth House in his wheelchair, Diana was waiting for him in the garden. 85 years old, she still maintained that old elegance. "Hello, Richard," said Diana, tears in her eyes. "Did I ever tell you I missed you?" Two old people sat down, remembering their love from 60 years ago. But there's something they don't know. That day they would make a decision that would change them both. "Diana, back then, why?" Richard's voice was trembling. "Because I was stupid. I chose my career over you. My biggest mistake. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet." What Diana pulled out of her bag shocked Richard. A wedding ring. She'd bought it 60 years ago, never used it. "Richard, we're old now, but we still love each other. This is our last chance." Right then, there was a knock at the door. It was Richard's son, Michael. But the real shock is, when Michael saw his father with Diana, he was surprised. But then he remembered something. The last words his mother, Sheila Sim, had said before she died. "Dad," said Michael, "Mom said something before she died. She was talking about Diana." Richard's face changed. "What did she say?" "She said, Richard's true love was Diana. But he chose me because I was pregnant." This is exactly when everything changed. Diana's eyes filled with tears. "So, you left me for Sheila?" Richard bowed his head. "I had responsibilities. But I always loved you." Michael continued. "Mom said, if he ever finds Diana, tell her, I loved her too. Because she made Richard happy." The voice on the phone sounded familiar, but Richard's cell phone was ringing. It was Steven Spielberg calling. He only had 10 minutes for Spielberg to talk with Richard. "Richard, my friend," said Spielberg, "I wanted to tell you something. Do you remember that film I offered you after Jurassic Park?" Richard remembered. "Schindler's List?" "I turned it down." "Yes, but I didn't know why you refused. Now I found out your granddaughter had gone missing at that time. You won't believe this, but," Spielberg continued, "I wrote that film for you, Richard. When you refused, I directed it. But I always wondered, did you regret it?" Diana held Richard's hand. Michael was standing beside them too. "No, Stephen," said Richard. "Family was more important than everything. And now I understand. I made the right choice." As security guards approached, Richard's heart started racing. Too much emotion, too many memories. It's too late now, but pain started in Richard's chest. Diana noticed immediately. "Richard, call a doctor." The ambulance came. As Richard was put on the stretcher, he was holding Diana's hand. "Diana," he whispered, "we may be 60 years too late, but "Shh, don't talk," said Diana, her eyes teary. "I love you." This was the last chance. In the hospital, Diana, David, Michael were by Richard's side. The doctor gave the bad news. His heart was very weak. "How much time do I have?" Richard asked. "A few days, maybe a week." But there's something he doesn't know. Diana had made a decision. You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet. Diana was talking with Michael in the hospital corridor. "Michael, I'm going to propose to your father. He shouldn't be alone in his final days." Michael smiled. Mom would have wanted this too. She always said, Diana was the only person who truly loved Richard. The next day, a small wedding was held in the hospital room. Richard, at his bedside, married Diana holding her hand. When the door opened, what they saw: David, Michael, hospital staff, and Steven Spielberg had entered the room. He'd come to attend the wedding. "My friend," said Spielberg, "your story could make a movie, but this time you're the actor." When he read that document, Richard smiled as he looked at the marriage certificate. Marriage at 85. I might have set a record. This is exactly when everything changed. On Richard's final day, all his loved ones had gathered in his room. Diana, David, Michael, Spielberg, even old set colleagues. "Let me tell you a story," said Richard in a weak but determined voice. Once upon a time there was a child, in competition with his brother. Both wanted to be famous. The child grew up, made films, won Oscars, but he received his greatest award in his final days. "What was that award?" Diana asked. "Finding his love again." Wait, don't miss this part," Richard continued. "I wasn't just a director, I was a storyteller, and now I understand. My most beautiful story hasn't ended yet." As his eyes closed, his last words: "Even when the cameras stop rolling, love continues." Everyone had learned the truth, but the real shock. A week after Richard's funeral, Diana also passed away. Just like in old love stories, they couldn't wait for each other. At his two brothers' funeral, David said, "Richard always said, the most beautiful films are lived in real life." This was his final film. Michael wanted his father's and stepmother's graves to be side by side. The gravestone read, "Richard and Diana Attenborough, love waits 60 years, lasts forever." When they thought it was over, the voice on the phone sounded familiar, but Richard's room at Denville Hall had been emptied, but the new resident moving into that room was very familiar. Sean Connery? Yes, the actor who played James Bond. He too was in his 90s, spending his days at the care home. Looking at Richard's Oscars, Sean said, "What stories this man must have lived." The nurse told him, "He married his love after 60 years, was telling stories even on his last day. What you're seeing now is nothing." Sean smiled. "I have stories too. Maybe it's time to tell them." This is how stories continue at Denville Hall. Each new resident draws strength from the previous one's story. You won't believe this, but Steven Spielberg actually made a film from Richard's story. The film, called The Last Director, told the love story of Richard and Diana. The film was shown all over the world. At the premiere night, Spielberg said, "This film is a tribute to Richard. He showed me, the most beautiful stories are lived in real life." David Attenborough spoke at the film's gala. "My brother always said, stories don't die, they just find new storytellers." now you are also the storytellers of his story. But the real shock is, the film was so successful that donations poured into Denville Hall. The Attenborough wing was built in Richard's memory. This was the last chance. But Richard's story didn't end, because his spirit continued to live at Denville Hall. New residents were inspired when they saw Richard's room. Sean Connery had started writing his own stories in that room. He only had 10 minutes. Every new resident would listen to Richard's story when they first arrived. Then they would start telling their own story. Diana's room at Brinsworth House was also turned into a museum. Their final photos together, marriage certificates, were hung on the walls. As security guards approached, residents would joke now. This had become Richard's famous saying. The Thames flows, Denville Hall stands, and Richard's voice still echoes in the corridors. Even when the cameras stop rolling, the story continues. It's too late now, but Richard Attenborough's story will never end, because now you are also part of this story. Every person watching this video carries Richard's message. Life is short, love is eternal, stories are immortal. At Denville Hall, it's still rumored that at night, the sound of action can be heard from the corridors, and newcomers always see Richard in their dreams on their first night. He's still there, listening to new stories, watching new love stories, witnessing new hopes. And the biggest secret, Richard's last words weren't actually re-hook. He had said next story, as if even death was the beginning of a new story for him. Is this story real or fiction? It doesn't matter anymore, because as Richard Attenborough taught, the most beautiful stories are lived where reality meets imagination. The end, or just the beginning. This story is inspired by Sir Richard Attenborough's real life, enriched with fictional elements. With themes of love, loss, hope, and new beginnings, the extended story of a legend's final days in a care home